first we have Andre Mestre, who's going to talk to us. The big question he's bringing is, how do students experience co-creation with AI? And I think I have put somewhere the bio of Andre, but that I misplaced now. But just to say that Andre is based at Slate, where he's a research fellow and doing doctoral research, wonderful doctoral research, where he combines many interests, as he has a PhD also in music. So he's kind of a sound artist, also working with technology, working with education and psychology. And yeah, I'm delighted to give you the floor, Andre.
Thank you, Vlad. Yeah, thank you for this introduction. It's very nice to take part in this symposium and to follow such a rich talk on the topic of alignment. It's nice that we don't every time you're coming up with these presentations, you know you're leaving so much out. So it's nice that other people are covering other things and that we get a multitude of perspectives. Anyways, as the title suggests, I'll be talking about the ways in which generative artificial intelligence is being experienced by students. And specifically, I'll be sharing some findings from my PhD project and one empirical study that I've conducted here in Norway, along with Ingen and Vlad, who are my supervisors at Slate. In this study, I've looked at how generative AI is shaping the creative process of students in disciplines like architecture, design, visual arts. And these studies have involved a brainstorming task, first of all, on ChatGPT, and a design task using Midjourney, which is a very common text-to-image AI. And here you can see some of the images that have been created by the participants. And as Constance mentioned in the beginning, we've used a Think Aloud protocol in which participants were asked to verbalize their thoughts and decision-making process as they were working. So as you can imagine, we got a lot of information and insight from that. And we finished with an interview where they were asked to reflect on the process as well. Here you can see a little bit how the process looked like. During this presentation, I'll talk a little bit about a few aspects of their experiences with AI, and I'll reflect on the implications that they may carry for us as educators. Some of the themes that I'll touch on are, first of all, our experience of technology, how it can go from the background to the foreground, the ontological metaphors that we use to frame those experiences and to frame the interactions that we have with these tools, and the role of reflexivity, because for thinking about education, I think this is what divides the waters, and this is what makes the experience be positive and constructive and growing, or not. So let's start with experience and the ways in which experience of technology it might be present to us or not. And I was thinking, when I'm writing on my computer, I can tell you some of the things I'm not thinking about when I'm doing my work on a daily basis. I'm not thinking about, for example, the configurations of the keys and the keyboard, and I'm not thinking about the differences between working on a computer and working on a typewriter versus even just working by hand. If I stop and think about it, these questions are interesting, but if I'm using my computer to work on a presentation, those things are not really on my mind. And this is because technology, of course, whether that's the machines that we're using, the programs, or even more pervasive technologies, pervasive, not perverse, like language, these technologies, they effectively become invisible to us once we become acquainted with them. And I say acquainted because technology does work as a two-way street. By learning how to use them, we also become oriented towards it. It kind of organizes how we think and feel. And maybe you don't even buy this idea that that technology may have some sort of agency of its own, but we don't really need to adopt a kind of object-oriented ontology to concede that they affect us. I think we only need to recognize that our actions are mediated by our social technical environment, and that the tools we use do have an impact on us, insofar at least as they suggest certain possibilities for action while making other possibilities less salient. So Rupert Wegriff and Louis Major, they draw attention to this in their new book, The Theory of Educational Technology, and they trace this back to the origins of formal education. They look back at the first schools, or first things we can call schools, and point out that they were created to support a new technology, literacy in that case. And I think this is an important point to remember, because we do need to be reminded that there isn't a version of education that is not deeply entangled with technology from the beginning. There are only educational configurations in which technology has already been naturalized and taken for granted. So why am I saying this, and why this long prelude? Because while AI is nothing new, and we talked about this on the previous presentation, it's been around for some decades. This new generation of generative programs is being experienced as something a little bit different, a little bit alienating, and something that is outside of us. When we use it, we're always thinking about it as kind of like a shoe that doesn't quite fit us. It's in the foreground of our experience, and I think we're very aware that it's having an effect on us. So let's turn to some of the things that participants have reported. This first quote's from a visual artist, and she's talking about being caught up in the generative drive that is so common in text-to-image AI, where every prompt you give it kind of leads to 4 new images that in turn can be multiplied and varied, and it just kind of keeps branching out. She said, whenever I feel like I've arrived, still I notice that there's more, and there's more. It's a continuous thing that could evolve in different ways. And this was a common refrain from participants who described using generative AI as kind of going down a rabbit hole. There's the sense in which the technology kind of takes you for a ride, and that the journey itself has a plan for you that's not necessarily what you had in mind. So you may come in with something in mind, but you have no idea where you're coming out. And granted, this experience may vary depending on the task. If it's a straightforward request to ChatGPT, of course, it's unlikely to lead you down a rabbit hole. But when you're dealing with an open-ended project, which is, this is the kinds of projects that people who are dealing with creativity tend to be interested in, and also a medium like visual design, I think then matters become quite different. And Sofiane Audry, who's an algorithmic artist and a professor of interactive media in Quebec, he puts it quite nicely in this quote here. And I'm just going to read the end of it. He says, the system is not going to give you what you want. You're going to discover what you want by working with the system. And here you can see one of his art installations with lots of little robotic agents. And, but that raises some uncomfortable questions about agency, right? And it's uncomfortable not to feel like you're in the driver's seat, or worse, that the boundaries between technology and self are not so clear-cut as you thought they were. Consider this experience that was shared by another participant who's a very frequent user of AI. She started questioning if she can't produce good work now just by herself. And she says that, quote, I feel sometimes like it's becoming part of my brain, like I'm becoming half human, half AI. And as I've said, our social technical environment is always a big part of who we are. But here she's painfully aware of that. It's a little bit different. Here's another quote from the same person. 1 week I'm very for it. I'm very happy about the fact that we have it. And then the next week again, I'm feeling like a rebel. I want to make physical things. I want to paint with my hands and not be a part of that. So, what is playing a role in these conflicting sentiments? I think it's, in one hand, there's the sense of mourning that is also voiced by teachers very commonly, that we're losing more direct ways of doing things, although we can problematize directness. But also this feeling that, but I think this feeling is also indicative of a tension in the way we normally conceptualize the role of tools in our lives and the role AI is playing in these co-creative dynamics. It doesn't seem to be doing what a tool is supposed to do. And that brings us to those ontological metaphors that I mentioned. These are the metaphors that kind of describe our relationship to things, right? We have a metaphor of these we have a repertoire of these metaphors, but they don't necessarily seem particularly apt to describe the experience of AI in kind of co-creative setups. Is AI functioning as an assistant? Is it functioning as a teacher? Is it functioning as a collaborator? Is it functioning as a slot machine? Conversely, does that make us managers, pupils, team members, gamblers? I think all of these metaphors, they do frame technology in a way that is true to in some key aspects of experience, or the experience that were reported by participants. They would give AI orders, they would ask for answers, clarifications, and they would get lucky with very cheap prompts sometimes. But still, these metaphors don't really tell the whole story. And as I've heard earlier this year at the PSM conference, shout out to the wonderful conference we had earlier. This from Hanna Meretoja, who's professor of literature and creative writing at the University of Turku. She said that we become particularly aware of our narrative resources when they fail us. And I think this is kind of true here. Our understanding of these systems is still quite tentative. So like us, the students are constantly revising their mental model of AI, trying to figure out how it works and what it's good for. And some of this reflexive work comes quite naturally to some students. Not to everybody, though. I wanted to share with you some snapshots of this happening. This is a participant reflecting on her experience afterwards. She said, "I'm actually surprised by how much I felt like I've learned from it. These images are not teaching you how to design in a feminist way, which is, I think, how I went into it. I was asking it, show me feminist design, but it was encouraging me to respond and critique what it was giving me." We see that she came in expecting AI to kind of function as a teacher, when she included reference to feminist design in her prompts, she was expecting the results to be just canonically feminist, and she wouldn't have to make decisions about that. But she quickly realized that she was ultimately in charge because there was no one else. So her understanding of what constitutes feminist design was ultimately the benchmark against which she has to evaluate those products. Another participant, this is another experience that was shared with me of this kind of initial moment of frustration I think a lot of us have in dealing with these technologies, but that kind of turns into an opportunity for insight. She says, "I didn't think I could learn from the AI's associations in a reflection of how our society associates. In the beginning, I'm more frustrated about how it makes the same mistakes." So we see how she kind of adjusts her perspective eventually. And instead of seeing AI as this incompetent assistant that was just there to realize her vision, she starts seeing that there's something to be learned from every result that she's getting, even if it isn't what she was expecting. So there's a lot more I wish I could share in this presentation, but I think might be a good place to stop because it's worth reflecting back on a couple of things. The first being that I think we're at a point in time where we're going to be interacting with emergent generative systems more and more. If universities want to prepare students for that, then I do think we need to explore different human technology configurations that go beyond the ontological metaphors that we're used to. So in the spirit of this event, these are some of the questions that kind of come to mind. First, how do we prepare students to engage with these systems? Second, and maybe we got some indications in the previous talk, but of course this is an ongoing conversation. Second, what kinds of new metaphors can we devise for our interactions with technology? Generative AI can function as an assistant, sure, we know that. Even as a teacher, this is not particularly new. But I do think that's missing the point to some extent because this has the potential of being something different. If you're willing to take a trip, AI can take a trip with you and lead you into some new creative territories. In part, I think that's because we're dealing with something that is extremely multi-voiced or polyphonic, maybe to use like a Bakhtinian term. As Wegerif and Major point out, I think generative AI puts us in dialogue with what Mead called kind of the generalized other. In this case, kind of the total sum of our digital culture. And students can gain a lot from that, from interacting with that. But by seeing the kinds of things that their prompts are eliciting, I think reflexive users can learn much about what is out there, whether that's kind of in the disciplinary conventions like what constitutes feminist design, but also social biases, of course. And because this kind of technology isn't really naturalized yet, it kind of reminds us to think, um, hopefully. But it's not a given, of course. A critical and imaginative disposition, I think, are essential for us to use these tools in a way that benefits us. Um, so I would argue this is the most important things that we can encourage our students to learn and to practice. And that's because that's going to drive how productive their experience with AI is. Okay, sorry, Vlad. I think I
Thank
went a minute
you.
over.
Thank you so much, Andre. Listen, I mean, fascinating. And you've raised questions, and we are at the question time. So fantastic. Did the job of the Q&A. There are some, I see Mark saying that chat is disabled. Yes, please, if you can put in the Q&A, actually, these comments and questions. And there are some very nice comments that I'm gonna let you, go through. We probably have time for one or two points. I do want to make a point, and this is kind of, I'm abusing my own prerogative as a co-chair, but it's interesting. I mean, it's fascinating to me, this use of the Think Aloud protocol. And I was even wondering if you would consider it almost as an intervention. It is a research tool, but at the same time, we're looking for pedagogical ways of reflecting on. How
Right.
would you see this as an exercise that could be widened? You don't have to always analyze the data, but did you see it as changing people's mind in the process of actually applying this method?
Um, yeah, I think this is something that kind of messes up a little bit the findings because, as I said, I said reflecting came easily to a lot of students. I think it came easily in part because I was watching and because they were in this kind of experimental setup and they were keenly aware
Mm,
um, that this was an experiment. But yeah, I mean that does have something to tell us about how we can use this in education settings. I do think it's important that we use AI in front of people and that we see other people using it as well.
mm,
Because I can share this with people. People use it in very different ways, and it's fascinating, it's hilarious, it's surprising. Um, so yeah, it is quite enlightening to see other people use it. Um, and if they are asked to give reasons for what they're doing, it can open up another layer of explanation and understanding.
mm, mm. Yeah, I mean, this is and user innovation can come in. I mean, we don't know, and maybe the creators of AI. I mean, this is all
Mm.
open-ended in so many ways, and that makes
Yeah.
it exciting and scary. We only have 1 minute, so I'm gonna give you just the chance to have a quick reflection on probably
Sure.
the biggest epistemological question, which is acting on and being acted upon. I'm going to reformulate a little bit, but I see there are some comments about interaction and interaction. I'm going to let you afterwards maybe reply to some if you have time, Andre. But
Sure.
do people feel they're in control, they negotiate the control? What was the most common experience of agency, co-agency, or even giving up agency?
Mm.
Kind of from your data, of course, you have a limited
Yeah.
specific sample, but
I would say that students tend to say that they are in control. Um, maybe, and if when I interviewed teachers, they would also, this was one of their main concerns. So I think there's also reason to believe that there's uh, sometimes we overstate our control and how much we shaped the process. So there's a little bit of reason to be a little skeptical of that, but I do think when students do see continuity between tools,
Mm,
even though they are aware that kind of AI is this new thing, and they are like, okay, trying to figure out how it fits in their lives. But they do see that they are in some cases able to shape the process, to arrive at places that they're happy with,
right.
even though it is highly co-creative. Yeah.